You're listening to Always Player One, a solo board gaming podcast.
Hello and welcome to Always Player One. I'm Scruffy.
And I'm Norm. Okay, so guys, we have a very different episode for you today. We are going to be counting down our current top 5 games to play solo, and also going to be counting down our top 5 games that we're most excited to try solo as well. Now, this episode was recently requested on Instagram by the user John Likes Games, so thanks for the tip, John. After that was recommended, we began sort of talking about the merits of doing an episode like this, and it turns out Scruffy has some pretty strong opinions on the subject of picking favourites. So once we've gone through our list, we'll look to unpack those opinions and talk about the psychology behind picking favourites and the merits of ranking games.
But before we dive in, I just want to mention that we're making some changes to how our Patreon works. So the Discord server is now free to join. We really want to get as many people to join as possible and realised putting that behind a paywall didn't really make sense for what we want. So if you'd like to see what our Patreon offers now, feel free to click and links will be in the description. And if you want to join our Discord, that would be fantastic. We'd love to chat with you and it's all free and it should be a fun, friendly, safe place. Yeah, we'd love to see you there. So feel free to join. Links to that are also in the description. Another note, we finished the game we mentioned at the start of the last episode. We were playing a podcast versus podcast game, if you remember, versus the Derailed guys of 1849. I've got that on my editing desk now, so it's quite like a 4-hour long playthrough to edit down, but that will be available on my YouTube to watch soon, so watch this space for that. It was a really fun and interesting game, and hopefully you 18xx buffs will get a kick out of that too.
Yeah, you know I love 1849, Scruffy. It was really fun, and how nice were the guys from Derailed?
Oh, they were fantastic. Really, really great lads. Yeah, it was a fantastic game, and I look forward to playing again if they ever want a rematch. But no spoilers here as to who won that one.
Yeah, and no spoilers here, like Scruffy said, but someone from this podcast did substantially better than somebody else from this podcast, but we'll leave you in suspense as to who did well and who didn't do so well.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's dive into the list. So like Norm said, we're doing a top 5 of our favourite games to play solo and a top 5 that we're excited to try. So let's start with our favourite games to play solo. Over to you, Norm. What's your number 5 favourite game to play solo?
Yeah, so first of all, a little bit about how I made the list. So the way I normally go about doing these kind of things is I just, from the top of my head, list as many games that I know I like solo. What I then did is I then cross-reference that with, I'm a part of a guild on BGG, a local guild where we share our top 50 every Christmas. So I normally keep my top 50 up to date for that purpose. So I cross-referenced it with that and then began sort of ranking them. How did you do yours, Scruffy? What was your sort of methodology?
Well, I've tried doing top lists in the past. So the main thing I have trouble with is trying to keep all the games in my head at once. So I just kind of looked at as many sort of big lists of top games and, you know, spotted all the ones I played and just had a think, yeah, I like that one, I like that one. And just was doing it kind of over the week. So every now and again, I'd think of one that I hadn't included and I'd throw it in there somewhere. You know? But yeah, it was just trying to figure out what games I've played and remember them all and then try and somehow whittle it down to 5 games. It was fun. I do have one honourable mention as well. Should we do some honourable mentions?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. What's your honourable mention?
So before, yeah, I mean, the only one I couldn't quite fit on the list was Lord of the Rings, the LCG, Legacy card game.
Oh, okay.
So the reason I didn't want to put that on the list and the reason it's kind of just fallen off the back is because I really don't like the kind of business model for those games, the way that you have to buy the packs and buy the expansions and stuff. The fact that the core set doesn't come with free copies of, for example, all the cards, you know, it feels like you can't have as much freedom in the deck builder and that you have to buy multiple core sets to own the optimum number of cards. Now that problem is completely mitigated on Tabletop Sim. So I've been playing it on Tabletop Sim and having an absolute blast because I can just copy and paste cards, move them in and out of decks and really be creative and free with the deck builder. So the caveat would be I like that game on Tabletop Sim, but in real life, not so much. But as a solo experience, it's really fun, actually. Yeah, I'm not sure it quite makes the top 5, but it's certainly worth mentioning that I really had a lot of fun with that, and especially just the construction element of making decks. It was really, really fun to tinker around with.
Brilliant. Well, I ended up making a top 10, so I'll just go from 10 to 6 as my honourable mentions, if that's okay.
Sure.
So from 10 to 6, it goes Spirit Island, Nautillion, Friday, Pandemic, and Railway Station. Those are my honourable mentions. All really good games. Just didn't make the list.
Right. Oh, so Norm, what's your top 5 for your favourite to play solo?
Okay, so in at number 5, this is a worker placement game. It's like a farming simulation worker placement game. It's number 16 overall on my top 50, both solo and multiplayer games. But in at number 5 of my favourite games to play solo, any idea what that might be, Scruffy?
Caverna.
It is Caverna, yeah.
Hey.
I absolutely love Caverna. The solo mode it's pretty straightforward. It's another one of those games that we've been speaking about with no real uncertainty other than the analytical uncertainty. There's no randomness in the game. There's no other forms of uncertainty. Everything is, the actions are all going to come out in the same way. But man, I just love playing through Caverna. At first, I found the amount of tiles that you can put in your cave a little bit overwhelming. But once you know how they synergize, playing around with those, there's enough there to make every game different if you just pick a slightly different, tile first. I haven't played it in a long time though, because I was finding the opening few moves a little bit scripted. I was getting a wood engine going, a stone engine going, a discount on buildings, and then I was building my food engine, and then I was last few turns scoring points, and then I was finding that the plays were a little bit too similar, but I've played this game so many times, it had to be on my top 5. I've played this solo to death. I've played it so many times.
It's one of the ones that got you into solo gaming, isn't it? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, after Feast Road in, this was the next sort of addiction for me. And there's something really nice about the way it works, the way you clear a forest and then you replace a tile with another tile on top that has a fence on it, and then on top of that you place your little animals. I really like that sense of building things up. It's very satisfying, and the interesting combos of the different tiles you can put in your cave. There's a lot to like about Caverna, and that's why it makes the list. It's a great game.
Okay, coming in at number 5 for me is Spirit Island. This is a game that I've only really gotten into solo recently, as you'll hear if you listen to our previous episode where we talk about it. And it's one I'm really excited to try more. The only reason it's probably not further up the list for me is that I haven't played enough games of it to really have explored it and feel totally confident saying that it's a great game and it doesn't just become a samey thing. But from what I hear, people really love the replayability, and apparently it does open up the multi-handed aspect when you get more and more familiar with the game. It feels like it's got a lot of room to grow and move up that list for me. But if you haven't, I'm sure you already are familiar with the theme and have heard about it. Fantastic game, and playing it single-handed, awesome.
Yeah, I thought this could be on your list. I know how much you enjoyed it, and I think same for me. The reason it's quite low down, I only made the honourable mentions for myself, is because of how little we've played it. But I'm glad to see it's represented on your list. So it's a good game. Okay, so in at number 4, this is another worker placement game. It is a sci-fi game. Any idea what that might be, Scruffy?
Is it Anachrony?
It is Anachrony. I love Anachrony. I mean, you know how much fun I have playing Anachrony. It's out of this world. It's so good. I mean, the thematic tie-ins to the mechanisms in Anachrony make me so happy. I love the way you put the workers in the exosuits and how they can return from their jobs either tired or refreshed, depending on what they are. I like the fact there are different types of workers that are better at doing different tasks. There's a lot to sort of manage, but it's actually pretty straightforward rules-wise. There isn't a horribly complex game. It has an amazing AI opponent that is really easy to manage and feels exactly like playing against a real life opponent, in my opinion. And on top of all of that, it looks phenomenal. Yeah, it just plays brilliantly. I know there are some expansions for the game and I haven't played those because there's just so much in the base game. You got the different factions already. Each faction has 2 leaders to choose from in the base game. There's a lot of replayability plugged into the base game already. So I haven't felt the need to go out and buy the expansions. But yeah, I absolutely love it. I love the time travel in the game, the way it's kind of like taking a loan that you have to pay back, but you don't just pay it back, you have to invest in going back in time in order to give it back to yourself. It's a really clever game. And I know you haven't played it solo, but we've played it multiplayer a few times, and I think you're a fan as well.
Oh, definitely. Cracking game. Yeah, it's a game I'm really looking forward to playing solo. I've played it with you, like you say, and I really enjoyed the playthroughs I've had. I love like the time travel mechanic as well. It's nice to see time travel in board game. I think more board games need to bring in time travel.
Excellent. And for yourself, number 4?
Right, another one of your honourable mentions. This one,
Can I guess?
yeah, go for it. I was just trying to give you a clue. What go on.
Is it Friday?
It's not Friday.
What?
No.
Oh, of course, it's Railway Station.
It's Railway Station, that's right, yeah. The reason for this, obviously, it's an amazing game, and I don't know if knowing the developer personally makes me more warm towards it, but you know, I mean, the amount of downloads he's got on it already from people, and the amount of buzz it's creating since it was released, it's obviously a really good, objectively, a really good game. A lot of people really like it, but I just keep coming back to it. I mean, I've got like 15, 20 minutes, whatever, and I'm just a bit too burnt out to play a really, really long, complicated solo game. It's just nice to chuck some dice and have a few crunchy decisions. It feels very therapeutic. It's kind of like, I guess, how most people feel about Sudoku and things like that, puzzle games.
Yeah, yeah.
It has that kind of level of, I guess, commitment and intensity, but it's obviously just a lot more fun for me, anyway.
Obviously, it's a great game. Yeah, we covered it in episode 5.
Yeah, I should probably say for people who don't know what it is, it's a roll and write made by Kendall Mackenzie, and it is inspired by 18xx games, so train games with a capital T, and you roll dice and then assign them to getting shares in companies and laying track and assigning trains to the companies, and yeah, it's very, very thinky, very crunchy, and a lot of fun. Would highly recommend giving it a go, and check out our episode on it where we talk with Kendall.
Yeah, definitely check out the episode if you haven't already. Kendall was really easy to interview and had some really interesting insights into developing the game and making it what it is. It definitely sort of changed the way I looked at a few of the mechanics since I've gone back and played it after I spoke to him on the podcast. So that was definitely really, really interesting. Great pick.
Thank you. Cool. So number 3 for you.
Number 3, you're not going to believe it. It's the third worker placement game on the list.
I'm sensing a theme.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because
Oh, I know what it is.
oh, go ahead.
Already, just from knowing there's another worker placement game, I'm going to guess it's A Feast for Odin.
Yeah, you're spot on. It is A Feast for Odin.
I know you too well, Nom.
This is the last worker placement game on my list. It's not like I have a great love for worker placement games. I just happen to think that these have really good solo implementations, play really well, and always keen to get them back to the table. But yeah, Feast for Odin was the game we covered in episode 1. So if you've listened to that, you already know my thoughts. If you haven't, then please go back and listen to episode 1. Very briefly, if you want the tagline, Feast for Odin has a remarkable solo system where you play with 2 different colours of workers. You play with one set of colours for one turn, they remain on the board, and the next turn, the ones you used previously will block spaces. So you have to plan always at least 2 turns ahead because you've got to be thinking about what's going to be available, what am I going to block for myself, how useful is this space now, will it be more useful next turn if I wait? If it will be more useful, I can't place it down now because I won't be able to repeat the action. There's a lot of considerations to make, and it feels slightly different to the multiplayer game, but it is slick, It is fun, it is interesting and thinky, and has a real small level of randomness that makes the game pop for me. And that's why it's the highest rated worker placement game on my solo list. Love Feast for Odin, and if you're interested, in my top 50 overall, Feast for Odin is number 11.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally valid. It's an absolutely fantastic game. Good choice.
Thank you. What about yourself? What's your number 3?
My number 3, I don't know if you'll even be able to guess this one. It's probably not at the front of your mind. It's a game that, I don't know what you'd call it, a tile laying game? It's set in a very popular world.
No, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it. What is it?
Founders of Gloomhaven.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I acknowledge that this game probably plays better with more players. Every time I play it solo, I feel like I wish I was playing it multiplayer, because I think it does sacrifice a lot in terms of player interaction, and it just changes. It does the thing we talked about with Roads and Boats, I think, where it changes the game into being a puzzle rather than a interactive experience. And I think that the scoring is a bit awkward in solo. I realized after only a few playthroughs solo that you are kind of capped at what prestige buildings become available in the game. You can take the most expensive prestige building, but that's the best score you can really get. But even with those little criticisms, I love the game. And to be honest, I haven't really, in my immediate gaming group, everyone just seems to really not like it. I mean, I know you hated the game. I tried playing it with you and Kendall once, and you just stopped after like 2 rounds. But I cannot understand why. I mean, I absolutely love the world in which the game's set. I love the way that tech is developed and the way your decisions are chosen from your hand of cards. I think the mechanics just are so nice and clicky, and the world just sucks me right in. I yeah, absolutely love it, and it's a really nice, relaxing one to bring out when I just want to chill out puzzle with some great artwork, great world, all the little factions and the way that they play so kind of differently. It kind of reminds me of the way that you get the choice with the Spirit Island gods, and that you can. Oh, it's a lovely game. It's a lovely game, and I would definitely recommend people try it out, even solo, but definitely multiplayer if you can find people.
Do you think that if you found it easier to get it to the table with a group, do you think it would still be this high on your solo list?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I've only, like I say, I've only actually played it solo, so this is the only list I can put it on. But it's a game I've had so much fun with. It kind of has to go on my favorite list because it's one of my favorite games, and I've never played it multiplayer, so I wouldn't be able to put it in a favorite list for multiplayer games. I could put it in a top list potentially of just my top games, and since I've played it solo, it makes sense to put it here. You know.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I don't know if playing it multiplayer would harm. I wouldn't be able to play it again solo, but you know, I can just kind of see out of my peripheral. I feel like it would work really well with some player interaction and the way that the resources become available. That looks really interesting in multiplayer, and that's kind of just stripped away for solo, which is a bit of a shame. But
Yeah, I wasn't going to guess that. I actually forgot that game existed. So
that's why I knew you'd have trouble guessing it. You've stripped it from your memory with bleach and firelighters, right?
it's funny because I actually backed the Kickstarter. The copy that you own used to be my copy, but I just didn't like it. So, but fair play if you do. No judgment here. Right, my number 2. You probably know what my number 1 is. So, just from process of elimination, do you have any idea what my number 2 might be?
Well, that's the thing I was thinking. I was like, I feel like I can guess Norm's number 1 just from knowing Norm, but I can't think of what else there could be. Like, no, I don't know. I don't know what else you play solo.
Yeah, this might.
Oh, yeah, I know what it's going to be. It's going to be Roads and Boats, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got all of them correct. You know me so well. But yeah, Roads and Boats is phenomenal. It's a great game. I know you much preferred it multiplayer, but as you know, that playing it solo and what it loses solo didn't bother me. In fact, I think it presents an entirely different challenge. It's much more difficult to plan what you have to do in a shorter period of time. I love everything about Roads and Boats. Again, it's one we covered on the show already, so if you want to know my full thoughts, please feel free to check it out. But I can't say too many good things about Roads and Boats. It's my favourite spotter game. It's number 3 on my top 50 games of all time. It's number 2 on this list, and yeah, I'd play it any time. I've recently just invested in a better organizer for it, so I should be able to play it straight from the box, apart from obviously setting up the map. And that should help me get it to the table even more. So I'm really looking forward to diving into that more, getting better at the game, and setting some high scores, hopefully.
I can't believe I've never asked you this, but do you prefer it solo or multiplayer?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's like two different games, isn't it, really?
It is. I think they both have their merits. I think it's more accessible solo, not because of the lack of interaction that plays a part, but mostly because the playtime is so much shorter. You know, it takes me, once I've set up the map, about 45 minutes to play through a solo game of Roads and Boats. That is like the same time it takes to play some roll and write games, and the level of complexity in this is, it by far eclipses any sort of other game that plays in 45 minutes. I can play like Pandemic in 45 minutes, and the level of strategy in those two games are vastly different. So yeah, solo you get so much bang for your buck. It's great. So much complex decision making in such a short amount of time. What's not to love? But yeah, then again, multiplayer, you have the interaction, and multiplayer creates such amazing stories when people steal each other's goods or build up walls or beat them by a point. I remember Kendall and I played a 2-player game of Roads and Boats, and he rushed the end because he realised I was about to produce my second stock certificate, and it turns out we tied. We had the exact same score, and I still talk about that game to this day to people who want to try Roads and Boats, as sort of an advert of how exciting the game can be. So I don't know what I prefer. I think that it's great either way. Sorry if that's a cop out. What about yourself? Number 2 for you.
So number 2 for me is one you've already mentioned.
Oh, I know.
Go on.
Is it a Feast for Odin?
It's a Feast Rodin, absolutely. Nothing more needs to be said. You summed it up really well. I feel the exact same way about it as you do. It was, for me, it was the first step into solo gaming, but just, I mean, it's so quick. It's like, if I haven't got time for my number 1 game, I'll play this game because it's just nice and quick and fun, and decisions always feel fluid and nice, and it just makes me happy. Great theme. Putting the little clunky tiles down on your board feels really satisfying, whether it's on tabletop sim or in person. Great game. I think we've probably both got the same number 1 here, and I think devotees might already be able to guess what it is.
Yeah. Well, this is exactly what I was about to say, because we have probably got the same number 1. We didn't speak about a list before recording, by the way, but it's fairly obvious to both of us that we're going to have the same number 1. I got to speak about Feast for Odin. As this is probably our second crossover, why didn't you take number 1? And
So, Mice and Mystics. Just a quick note, I haven't actually played Mice and Mystics. I'm not negging on it. It's just the first board game I saw out of my peripheral vision. Mage Knight. It's the perfect game at the moment. It's the best game I've ever played. Oh my god, I love Mage Knight. In Mage Knight, if you haven't played it and aren't familiar with it, you play as a Mage Knight, and you get to choose which one you play. The one you play will vastly change how your game's going to go. They get different cards in their starting deck, different skills they unlock as they play, and you are attempting to take on 2 cities, which are just big old fortified sites full of enemies. But that doesn't even scratch the surface. I mean, the you move along a map and play cards, and it's just always crazy, intricate, clever, nuanced decisions where, how do I move from here to there? Which cards do I play? How do I take out this enemy? Or maybe I don't want to take this enemy, I'll take a different enemy. And the way the dummy player works in it, it's all perfect. If you haven't seen our episode 3, where we talk about it, we were both really hyped to get on and talk about it as quick as possible, and can't sing its praises enough. Absolute gem of a game.
Yeah, my number 1's also Mage Knight. Mage Knight is my number 2 game in my top 50 overall, but definitely my number 1 solo game. Like Scruffy said, it is what I would consider a near perfect solo game. In fact, I gave it a perfect 10 on BGG. You're going to have a hard time getting a like a professional opinion or review about Mage Knight from us, because unfortunately we're just incredibly biased. We love it. It's a great game. I played it more than probably any other game. I think I've played it 17 times this year since January, and it's rare that I get to play the same game that many times. But yeah, I love Mage Knight. I've said quite a lot about it in episode 3, and I think Scruffy summed it up perfectly. I'll quote him from that episode. He said, games tend to either be very heavily strategic or very heavily thematic, and Mage Knight does both in equal measure, and I think that's why I love it so much.
Wise man. Just going off the back of that, have you tried the Star Trek reskin? I know we're both real next gen Trekkies. Have you tried? Is it Star Trek Frontiers? I think it's called something like that.
Star Trek Frontiers, yeah. No, I haven't tried it. It's a literal reskin of Mage Knight. It has the same system, similar rules. There are minor changes, to my understanding. There's no day and night phase. It's just which makes sense because you're in space. But no, I haven't tried it, which doesn't make sense because, like you said, we are both Trekkies. I love Star Trek, but something about it, it's so. The board looks so dark, whereas Mage Knight is full of color and it's so beautifully vibrant, and the artwork is spectacular. Star Trek Frontiers has a black board because it's space. It also has actual photographs as the art rather than drawn art by an artist. And something about that just doesn't sit right with me. I'm happy to try it, but I've been put off by the way it looks, if I'm honest. If I know it's the same system as Mage Knight, and I have Mage Knight already, I don't know why I want to try it. Plus, Mage Knight has more expansion material, so.
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll have to make it an honourable mention for our next list, the top 5 games we're looking forward to.
Yeah, that's a really nice segue. Well done.
Yeah, that was pretty good, wasn't it? It came out of nowhere. That.
We've been doing this a while now. We're getting pretty good. Yeah, do you want to start this one? What's your?
Yeah, all right. I'll kick us off with this one. So, my number 5 that I'm looking forward to is the Fallout board game.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about that solo.
Yeah, so have I, and I've played it multiplayer. I didn't enjoy my multiplayer playthrough of it, which would seem like a bit of a damning thing for why would I want to try it solo. Well, I think a lot of the problems it had multiplayer would be eliminated by playing solo. I think that the biggest falling down of the game was that, for example, you'd have things like you start a narrative in a place and you slide a little narrative card in the deck for the future, and some other player would come along and resolve that narrative, and it just felt a bit weird and disjointed. And obviously, if you remove that other player, then it's only you who's going to be seeing the fallout of the little seed you plant, which that's great. There are also a few other things. I won't go into too much detail here, but yeah, I think it's going to play a lot more fun solo, and also I think it feels like the Fallout games. I've played a lot of the video games. I was a big fan of New Vegas when that came out. It feels like, for me, a lot of the fun of that is in the isolation. It's in being a kind of almost like a lone survivor. I think it's all about the sort of post-apocalyptic world where you're finding your way, exploring, and wandering around, and bringing other players to that just felt like I stopped playing while they were playing. I don't know if other people feel the same way, or I'd love to hear back from you guys about if you've tried it both, whether it works better solo than multiplayer. But from my instinct tells me it would, and I'm really looking forward to answering that question for myself at some point.
Yeah, and a long-time listener and friend of the show, Dan, wrote in, I can't remember what episode it was, and actually recommended that we try Fallout Solo because he said it's one of the most thematic solo experiences he's had. So yeah, it comes highly recommended. So that's cool. Yeah, good pick. Good pick. Right, my number 5 that I'm excited to try is 1862. 1862 has a solo mode that works in a different way to the multiplayer. The reason I think that's pretty cool, well, there's a couple of reasons. One, most 18xx games don't even play well 2-player, let alone solo. So that's interesting. That's a really interesting thing that they've tried to do. But more importantly than just curiosity, The real reason I'm excited to try it is because I think 1862 specifically, the fun of that game for me was trying to get all my companies to work, selecting the right companies to merge with the different types of trains, watching them go up on that stock chart and make as much money as I can. There are things in that game that exist that don't exist in other 18xx games. For example, you can own 100% of your own company, whereas you can't in most others, with a few exceptions. For that reason, it kind of feels like what makes the game successful isn't the player interaction as much as other 18xx games. What makes the game successful is what you are trying to do yourself. So I think that could possibly translate quite well into a solo experience. So I'd be interesting to see that. I've played this with you, Scruffy. I don't know how much you remember about the game, but do you agree with me there when I say that a lot of what made the game interesting was trying to get your companies to gel well and merge and work? Or am I talking rubbish?
No, absolutely. I mean, I kind of was trying to remember the game while you were talking about it. When you first said an 18xx game solo, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. You couldn't do that. But as soon as I started to remember the kind of things I didn't like about that one multiplayer, like owning 100% of a company and the way the companies merge, kind of didn't feel quite right. It didn't feel 18xx. When I think about but if you played that solo with that rule, suddenly it all that makes sense now. So I can quite see how that would work solo over multiplayer. Yeah, it's not one of my favorite titles for 18xx games multiplayer, but I'd never even considered playing it solo before. So that's really interesting, fun.
Yeah, it has a different interface as to how you can buy shares and things like that, which might make it a little bit more difficult. But it's interesting that they've gone and even bothered to make a solo mode because most 18xx games wouldn't. It's unusual that you didn't like it. I thought it was fantastic multiplayer, but this isn't a multiplayer podcast, so we'll move swiftly on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, it's not that I didn't like it. It's just not one of my favorites. Okay, my number 4 for games I'm looking forward to is Anachrony. Like you said before, in the top 5 ones we enjoy, we've played that together multiplayer. Never played it solo. Looking forward to giving it a go. I hear good things.
Yeah, mostly from me.
The thing I'm most keen to see in that is the automa, because everyone mentions how simple and clear and good and interesting it is, and I just want to see that for myself. I'm really interested in AIs and automas, and yeah, I really want to see how that works.
I think you'll like it. I'll be very surprised if you don't like it, Scruffy. We've been playing together for a few years now, and I'd like to think I can guess what you would like and what you don't like. And if I was a gambling man, I'd bet that you would enjoy the game.
So your number 4 now.
So my number 4 is a game called Black Sonata.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this one, but it's really interesting. I'll just give you a quick rundown. So it's set in like a Shakespearean London, and your role is to track down and identify the mythical Dark Lady. For listeners who might not know, the Dark Lady was the muse of several Shakespearean sonnets, but she's never been identified. So the game, what it looks like to me, is basically a blend of interesting deduction puzzles and hidden movement. The hidden movement is done by like a card system where you go through a deck and it gives you an icon which will match, 1, 2, or 3 locations on the board, and you'll put markers down on those locations. Then you flip over another card and it will tell you where she's moved to, and that can help narrow down where she is. And all the times you've got to try and make movements closer to her as well. So that's really interesting. But what's more interesting is when you do find her, you're then given clues about her identity. There are several different people the Dark Lady might be, and you're given clues about who that could be. So there's a little bit of deduction, there's a little bit of hidden movement, and if I'm honest, what really intrigued me about the game is I've never even heard of a hidden movement solo game before I saw this one. I didn't even think that was possible. So yeah, that really intrigued me, and as well as that, from looking at the game, it's full of little historical references to the real life people. It's also full of little Shakespearean quotes, which I think is really adorable, and just seems like something I would really get a kick out of.
Wow, yeah, that seems really interesting. I'd love to hear how that plays. I've never heard of it before, and that seems like it'd be right up my street as well, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. If I ever get it played, I'll let you know what I think.
Yeah, Shakespeare is my bag.
Yeah, I thought you would specifically like that theme a lot.
So yeah, my number three games I'm looking forward to is actually one that a listener has written in about, and it is Drifter.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so this is a game that we've kind of got lined up in our sites to play and record an episode on. Drifter, it seems to be a roll and write Western themed game. I don't know much more about it other than that, but that's enough to get me really, really, really interested. I haven't played many Western board games other than Bang, which is not the best. I just think it's such a lovely theme. I absolutely can't wait to try it. I need to play more roll and writes, and I'm genuinely excited to play it.
Nice. Yeah. Just a quick one though. You've also played Great Western Trail, which rocks.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an interesting theme, and it captures the imagination. I think in a really nice way. I think there's something to be said for the kind of Lone Ranger thing, and I think there's a lot of potential to unpack there. And the title of this game, Drifter, implies that to me, that you're going to be a lone cowboy wandering the deserts, and I don't know, we'll find out. For me, the unknown and the novelty is a lot of the excitement. The more I know about things, kind of often the less I'm interested in it. But this one, I don't know much about it. I know it's a game that has a really cool sounding theme, and linking it to a mechanic I'm keen to explore more. Roll and write. Yeah, can't wait to crack it open.
Yeah, nice one. I also looking forward to playing that as well. My number three is Pax Pamir Second Edition. In Pax Pamir Second Edition, it's set in Afghanistan in the early 19th century, and you play as someone with political power and with interest in the political stage at the time. What's interesting about the game is as the game goes on, you're able to shift your alliance between the British, the Russian, and the Afghan as well. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting that you don't play for one of the sides. Instead, you play the sides potentially against each other. I've not played the game, so I don't know how it works, but that really caught my attention and made me want to play. On top of that, it's designed by Cole Worley, best known for his work with Root, but I actually quite enjoy his historical theme games, like John Company, for example. I think is really, really interesting. I think the aesthetic that he uses for his historical games really, they just really talk to me. I enjoy that aesthetic a lot. And on top of all of that, the solo mode is designed by Ricky Royal, who I greatly admire, love watching his videos. Feel like more often than not, I tend to agree with the things he says. So, yeah, I'm interested to play that one. It's also one I know is available at a friendly local game store. So maybe next time I'm down that way, I might be looking to pick this one up.
Fantastic. Sounds really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I think what's lovely about it as well is it has a beautiful cloth board. It's not cardboard, it's like cloth, which looks phenomenal, looks out of this world. If you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend looking that up because just for component quality alone, it's just begging to be touched and played.
Okay, so number twos then. Number two for me, for games I'm looking forward to, is Seventh Continent.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about this one. It was actually when I first got into board gaming, not even just solo board gaming. It was kind of a grail game, I guess, because I couldn't find a copy of it, and I was really excited about it. Any game with exploration and emergent story, which it seems to have, makes me very, very excited. I'm a explorer at heart, and I can't wait to get a chance to play it. I haven't been able to find a table for it on Tabletop Sim at the moment, so I haven't. It's not as easy access as a lot of games, and so it's the same reason I haven't played it still to this day. It's just getting access to it. But yeah, number two for me. Can't wait to finally get a hold of it, get my hands on it, and give it a go. Maybe I'll put it on my Christmas list this year.
Good idea. Yeah, I haven't played Seven Continent either. That's an interesting pick. It hasn't really. It's not something that's grabbed my attention. If you can sort of elevator pitch it to me, do you think it's something that I would enjoy, knowing my tastes and what you know about the game?
I don't know. It feels like more of a story-driven game than a kind of crunchy decision game. It feels like a game, so it's a lot about the. I think the game works on tiles a lot. So you start on a tile and then you flip over tiles that reveal new locations, and you kind of explore the map. But yeah, I think it does seem like more of an immersive, narrative-driven experience. So I think perhaps for what you're looking for in terms of crunchy strategical decision making, it might not be your cup of tea, but I don't know. I don't know. I think you'd have to be in the right mood for it.
Okay, yeah, that's probably fair. That's probably fair.
But yeah, for me, I love RP and stories and anything like that. I've always got a kick out of games in the past that really try and do stuff with story and things like Tales of Arabia or even Above and Below, stuff like that. They always kind of scratch that itch for me to varying degrees, and I think hopefully Seventh Continent would be able to take a unique spin on that sort of game, maybe.
Cool. So my number two is Cloudspire. I've played this multiplayer with yourself, Scruffy, and
Hmm.
I liked it a lot. Played it on tabletop sim, so I didn't even get to push around all the poker chips stacked up. I didn't get to glide them across the beautiful neoprene mats that I see everyone posting on social media. But I did enjoy the level of decision making in the game. I love the fact that before the start of the new round, you have to choose which units you're going to recruit and deploy. I love how the minions are automated, and I can see that because they have such a simple automation, that it's going to make it a phenomenal solo game. I can just imagine myself trying to manipulate their automation and exploit their automation and their predictability, but also the game has a small level of randomness with the chips that you flip over and have to reveal. That's something that I found slightly problematic in the multiplayer game because I think it's safe to say you got a slightly better deal with the with the chips that you turned over. But I can in the solo game where it's just you trying to overcome what the game throws at you. Obviously, that's not a problem at all. It can be as swingy as it wants to be because it's your job to respond and come up against that, and you don't have another player who's going to benefit from that. So yeah, for me, Cloudspire, I loved the multiplayer, but I got the distinct impression it worked better solo. And on top of that, there's also solo and cooperative campaigns to play through as well. So a lot of content to explore. That's definitely one I want to pick up as soon as possible. Looks great.
Yeah, I think that was a totally valid, I guess, criticism of playing competitive multiplayer. That I was like turn one, and we both flipped over a tile, and it was the same decision making on our part, but I got a massive boon and Norm got a massive hit. Obviously, that sort of stuff might balance out, but it feels like because it's not that many rounds in the game, it feels like a bit chaotic, a bit of the bad sort of randomness that we personally don't really enjoy in competitive games. I think that's fair to say, and like you say, that sort of randomness is a lot more forgivable in solo because
Well, it's you versus the game. So if it decides to throw something hard at you, that's an interesting challenge. And Scruffy's not sat on the other side of the table benefiting from my despair, So I think I just got the distinct impression that I wouldn't have mind getting whacked turn one if it was a solo game. Whereas, I did somewhat, it was a little bit of a bad feeling moment.
yeah, yeah, totally valid.
Yeah, cool. But yeah, that's my number two, Cloudspire. Looks phenomenal. Played it. I love the decision making in the game and can't wait to play through the solo and multi hand the co-op scenario as well.
So, drum roll for our number ones games we're looking forward to. For me, it is Iron Sworn.
Oh, I should have been able to guess that, really.
Yeah, I thought you might have guessed it, but oh my god, I cannot wait to play Iron Sworn. This is a soloable RPG. You can play it, I think, cooperatively with a small group. It says in the manual. I have never played a solo RPG before, and so this is the one that's kind of caught my attention the most, and the way the world it looks and the way the thing that accounts for a GM in this game is called the Oracle, which gives you some sort of feedback about if you're struggling to make decisions. You can roll a dice, or if you're not sure how an outcome might happen, the Oracle, you consult the Oracle. Oh, I love that. It gives it a feeling of authority, and I'm really excited to try it. I'm a bit nervous, a bit hesitant going in because I've never, like I say, done a solo before, and it feels like a whole new world of solo gaming that I can't wait to explore. So that's why I think that game gets the number one spot for me, because it's not just a game; it's a whole genre. It represents a whole genre opening up for me.
Yeah, and I'm also excited to try it. Scruffy sent me over the rules. I've been looking at them as well. I think the goal is to cover it on the show, as long as we can get it played enough. But I'm also excited for Iron Swan. That's a really good pick, and I think justifiably so, because, like you said, it's not just one game; it's an entirely new experience that we've not tried before. So, yeah, I think that's a perfect pick. But it's not my number one. My number one, I don't think you'll be able to guess, so I'll just go straight into it. My number one is Fields of Fire. Fields of Fire is a GMT war game. It's solo only, and I currently own Fields of Fire 2. Now, I haven't got to play it yet because I was having a difficult time learning the game. Since we started the podcast, I've put the rulebook down and I haven't had the time to go back to it, unfortunately. Hopefully that can change and I can find some time to get back into it. But wow, it looks like so much fun. It has a map which is entirely card driven, so you lay these cards out. In the first game, you do it randomly. In the second game, the scenario tells you how to lay the cards out. So the variability in setup is outstanding. The level of decision making, you have to send orders sort of downstream through your company. So the level of decision making is just looks like it's on a different level, which is, as you know, something I love. I love crunchy decisions. And it has a really unique randomizer as well. A lot of war games will use dice, this use cards, but at random intervals it asks you to pick up what you've already used and shuffle again. So sometimes the cards might get really predictable because you've managed to get a long way through the deck. Other times it can be a little bit more swingy because it might just ask you to pick up your cards immediately after you've shuffled them already. So, yeah, that's something I find really interesting. There's a lot to like about that. There's a variable setup, there's the unique randomizer, there's a crunchy decision making, and on top of that, each game comes with 3 unique campaigns to play through. So that's a lot of game in the box as well. So super, super excited to play Fields of Fire, and personally, Fields of Fire 2, because that is the one that I own.
Awesome. Well, those are our top 5 lists for games we are excited about and games that we have played. So let's open it up a little bit, because I'd like to talk about the notion of doing top 5 lists, and maybe even just broader than that, having favorites in general, because I think it's something that is very rarely actually talked about. And I have quite strong opinions on this, as you mentioned in the intro. I find making top 5 lists or top anything lists really, really difficult, as I've told you before.
Yeah.
To me, I understand categorizing things in broad strokes. I mean, it's kind of impossible not to say, I like this game, or I don't like that game, or even I really like this game and I kind of like this one. So within categorical thinking, I think that's unavoidable. But then to try and assign a number to those specific titles within those broader categories, I find that really hard. I mean, my list today that I've presented for this podcast might be different to another day. If I were to look back on this, even when the podcast is released, perhaps I've discovered another game, or perhaps I have a playthrough of one of the games on that list, or even another game that's not even on that list, and it will just be different. So yeah, to me, it's kind of like, if there's that much flexibility and it can vary that much, then why number them? I mean, on the flip side of the coin is that if the lists aren't flexible, so maybe for other people, maybe that's just a problem with me and labeling things. Maybe for other people, I know actually, having spoken to other people that their lists don't change very much, I don't know how much that's a good thing. So if your lists are inflexible, to what extent does that kind of make new experiences, tarnish new experiences? If you're able to say, well, these are my top 5 games, and then you play a new game and you are reluctant to change your top fives, does that diminish that new game you play? Maybe if you didn't have that top 5 list, you would have enjoyed that game more. What do you think about that? Do you think that there is the potential that an inflexible top 5 will diminish new games for you? Or do you think that having that permanence means that if a game really is outstanding, then it actually heightens the joy of a new experience?
For me personally, I'm well aware that my lists will change. I said earlier in the podcast that I'm part of the local guild on BGG, and every year we do our top 50, and everybody's list on there changes. It's normal. I think what's interesting is doing a list is just like capturing a snapshot of what your taste was. And people love doing stuff like that. People like logging plays. People like to look back and see how far they've come in the hobby and how much their taste has changed. I don't think there's any harm in that at all. And I don't think it's, top 5 lists are fun, but I don't think, or top 10 lists or top whatever, they're fun. But I don't think they should be taken too seriously because A, we're just two guys who like games, and B, like you said, they will change, and it's perfectly normal to want to play games that are lower down the list. It all depends on your mood, doesn't it? I kind of agree. It's not very constructive to compare two games that are completely different and then try to rank them. For example, Roads and Boats is very high on my top 10 or my top 50 or whatever you want to call it. Look at a game that's completely different, combat oriented, like Commands and Colors. I recently have been playing a lot of 2-player Commands and Colors, even though it's lower down on my list. So how do you account for that? Well, it's because that's just what I'm in the mood to play at the moment. I don't know. I don't know if it tarnishes. I don't think it tarnishes your experience too much if you make lists, but I think you have to, if you want to make a list of your own, you have to kind of know that it's not really to be taken very seriously. It's just a fun, constructive thing to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I like the idea there of looking at things as a kind of snapshot, a flash image of you in a moment, and your because I think a lot of top lists do give you a sense of identity, and I wonder to what extent that's a good thing. But I think it's interesting and fun. Yeah, and in no way do I want to kind of say that you shouldn't do lists. They're bad for your health. They're bad for. I think yeah, they are fun, and there's a kind of drama to them, and I enjoy watching like top 10 videos on YouTube or whatever because it gives a nice sense of expectation and ramping up. It's a good performative arc, I suppose, in presenting opinion. I think the thing I find difficult is straddling that line between it being nonsense and it being overly important. And I can't really get that middle ground of it being, relevant but not over important. Because I find it so difficult to know what it even means to have a top 10 in a category. Like I say, this was really difficult for me to come up with my list because I'm constantly redefining what that top list means. And unless you're really super specific about it, a top X games is that the top games you've enjoyed, the games you're most likely to play, the games you think are mechanically superior to other games, or a kind of amalgam of all of that. And that is a lot of qualitative data to sort of pull down into a number. And it's something that my brain really rejects and finds very difficult to do.
Yeah.
But I admire that other people can and enjoy it. And when I talk to you about your top 5 lists and stuff, it's really nice to hear the enthusiasm. And you'll say things like, "Oh, I played a game of this today, and it's gone up or it's gone down on my top list." And it's kind of almost like you didn't expect it to happen to you. It's something external from you, and I find that really, really fun. But I personally just can't engage on that. I can't, it's something that I find really, really difficult to quantify something that isn't quantifiable.
Well, you sort of touched on something there, and I think it's important that our listeners know I really enjoy making lists.
Mm,
Always have done. My dad and I often, for years now, have often gone. Do you remember the show Desert Island Discs, Scruffy?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll often go, okay, desert island this time. What 5 things are you taking with you? And we'll say stuff. We come up with all kinds of nonsense. I remember one time I texted him out of the blue. I said, "Top 5 second albums ever made." These have to be this. They can be any genre, any artist, but they have to be their second album. And he texts me back within like 20 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I think it
it's just fun.
Yeah, I think it's great, and I think it's great as a kind of conversation starter, and to generate interesting conversation around it. Yeah, I can't argue with that. I totally get it.
I think the enjoyment comes from the same reason that people listen to our podcast, or the same reason people join subreddits or guilds on BGG or Facebook groups. People enjoy thinking critically about the hobby that they're in or about the things that they enjoy. The more you like something, the more you want to think about it, talk about it, and like you said, doing a list is a way that you can both publicly display your list and start conversations with strangers. But on top of that, it's also something you can do privately and just have a few moments engaging with the hobby on a different level that you wouldn't normally. Just something you can privately think about and enjoy analyzing the games that you play. I think that's yeah, the interest comes from that, in my opinion.
I think I totally understand that. My only kind of reservations with it is to do with how we approach new experiences and new games, and how we kind of limit ourselves based on our established identity, and we kind of often reject things that don't fall into the categories which we associate ourselves with. So for example, if you have a top 10 list and there's no worker placement on there, you might conclude, well, I don't like worker placement games. And when someone says, would you like to play this worker placement game? No, I don't like worker placement games. I think that is and obviously all you need to combat that is the basic bit of self-awareness, which I'm sure everyone has, and I'm sure I'm just raining on a parade for no reason here. But I think it's danger that I spot in myself, and so it's something that I kind of worry about, because it's very easy to, like I kind of mentioned briefly, brush everything with nostalgia and see things as better than they are in retrospect,
Yeah,
and then that mean that a new experience or a new thing, we kind of say, well, it's not as good as X. When I first got into gaming, I really liked, and I still do, Cosmic Encounter. And if I'm playing a similar sort of weight and difficulty game, I might think to myself, well, I'd rather just be playing Cosmic Encounter because it's better. So I recognize that is a kind of a demon in myself that I try and avoid. And I think top 10 lists kind of exacerbate that problem of approaching new experiences for me. But maybe it's just
I think that's a really interesting point. I would say on the other side of the coin, as well as nostalgia, there's another issue, which is being a prisoner of the moment. If you are enjoying something and having fun, it is sometimes difficult to remember how good other things are. It's quite common for people to sit around a table, enjoy a game, and go, "This is the best game I've ever played." And then in retrospect, they go, "Oh no, it wasn't." But I think sometimes having a somewhat grounded idea of what your favorite games are might help combat that feeling. And I think, I don't think either is bad. I don't think being nostalgic is bad, and I don't think being a prisoner of the moment is bad. It's fine to enjoy things in the moment, and it's fine to say I have a favorite. But I just think, yeah, both of those are things that affect people, and yeah, whether they're useful or I don't know if either are particularly damaging. I think you're onto something though, because for me personally, as a person, I am very much the things I enjoy. That's kind of what I identify myself with the most. So, board games, horror movies, music. These are all things that I enjoy, and when I think about who I am as a person, I think about those things. Some people think of their personality traits. Some people think of their work. Some people think of their beliefs. think of the things that I enjoy. And I remember growing up when I was very, very young, I'm talking like 11 years old maybe, I got super into Guns N' Roses. I mean, like really into them. And I remember a friend of mine recommended a song, and I started listening to it. I can't remember the song now, so you have to forgive me. A few weeks later, he said, "Oh, what do you think of that song?" I said, "Yeah, it's really, really good." I said, "I haven't been listening to much of it though, because I thought that I might like it more than November Rain." And so my 11-year-old me liking November Rain the most was a part of my identity. And I think you're probably right. That negatively impacted my ability to enjoy this other song. So yeah, you might be onto something, but then again, I don't have that problem anymore because I'm an adult.
Well, yeah, and it might just be that self-awareness is what's needed. I think it's that is a fascinating story, and I think it hits to the heart of what I'm getting at. And just quickly before I unpack that, the thing you said about being a prisoner of the moment, that is something I aspire to. I think that is something that I want to happen. I mean, we are only who we are in the moment. And if I'm having a great time and saying this is the best game I've ever played, that's fantastic. It doesn't matter if it is objectively the best game I've ever played. And I think that's kind of my point, that these top 5 lists limit us from being able to feel that in the moment, because I can't feel like this is the best game I've ever played. I know I've played a better game. My top number 1 game that I always put at number 1 on my top 500 list or whatever
Yeah.
blocks me from being that prisoner of the moment. I'd say that's not so much a prisoner of the moment, but just in the moment,
Mm.
Just moving on from that, what you said about that you had an identity established and you didn't want that to be changed by this new experience. Yeah, it is a form of tribalism, I guess, but also just something that inhibits our growth. If I listen to, for example, I used to really be a bit of a snob with certain types of music. I think a lot of us fall into that trap. And I'd say, well, I hate all songs that have this sort of vocal intonation. I don't like anything emo or whatever. I think that was my big thing. And I started to realize, if I were to hear a song and just hear that sound, I wouldn't be able to give the song the time to impress me, or the time to let me enjoy it. And that's denying myself experiences and enjoyment in my life in order to cling on to this weird formed identity I have of myself as a non enjoyer of that thing. It's interesting.
It is interesting. And I've said that I've gotten better at, allowing myself to have new favorites. And there are some aspects of life where fully grown adults still don't let that happen, including me. I would never change my favorite football team, for example. And you're right, that is embedded in tribalism.
Yeah, I think it's a thing of, that people wear their prejudices with pride at some point, and that is something that can only be combated by being hyper self-aware of it if you want to combat it. But I think, some people crave that grounding that you were talking about before, of knowing who they are and being self-assured. And yeah, I just wonder how healthy that is, and whether that does prevent us from growing as people and developing as new and more diverse people, because we're constantly changing unless we stop ourselves. And I just, it's a bit melodramatic to say that top 5 lists would do that, but they're a kind of a symptom of the same sort of thinking. If you go too deep down that rabbit hole, it's just something that I have a hang up about, and maybe that's a prejudice I need to remove in order to grow, huh?
Oh, that was brilliant.
But yeah, like I say, and I hope I've made clear, I totally get it, and I totally see the appeal. I mean, I had fun, even though I found it difficult getting the list together for this episode, and I'm keen to explore it and open it up more and reevaluate. So yeah, another wonderful segue into our question for today for you guys. This will hopefully help me get over my own prejudice, and it's something I am genuinely interested in hearing from you guys. So the question today is, what is your top 5 favorite solo games? Yeah, I really would love to hear back from you, and it's exciting, it's fun. It'd be interesting to get a glimpse into that photo frame moment of where you are right now. Yeah, it does sound fun. I'm interested.
So, probably a good time to read through the responses we had from last episode.
Awesome.
We got a couple. The first two are from Reddit. We're now on Reddit as well, by the way, and we post a lot in the solo board gaming subreddit. So keep an eye out for us there if that's your jam. The first one was from Mr. Perfect. I thought what he said was really interesting. So in response to the episode, he said, "Good stuff. Although I don't agree on only playing solo-handed, as he feels that you won't have the balance and support that's needed."
So this is for Spirit Island, obviously.
Yeah. So you said playing two is as hard as you make it. Yes, you can most certainly plan out every detail and get brain dead quite fast. But if you're not shooting to take down a top level adversary, then just try limiting yourself to quick decisions, maybe a minute each, and just see what happens. It usually works out just fine, especially in the base game. Plus, with all the spirits available, you can try out more combos. Seeing synergies between some spirits is very cool, and it's obviously such a brilliant game. Sunday, when he has the free time, he's going to play 4 hands, but he hasn't done that yet. So, yeah, what do you think of that one, Scruffy?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense to try and limit. I think that's probably just a hang up I have in myself, is trying to overanalyze and get things just right. And maybe it does all work out in the end if you just pick. If you notice your move, pick a move, or maybe one or two and pick between them. I think it's probably a mindset that you develop as you play the game. Four-handed sounds crazy. I get it. You are Mr. Perfect, but that's madness.
Yeah, it reminded me of some advice I heard on a podcast about playing 18xx faster. The advice was just play faster. Just,
Yeah.
don't worry about $10 on your route. If you think you can see the best route, just do it and move on to the next person. And I was like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think that makes sense to try and get the best decision when you're that sort of stuff comes with multiple playthroughs, and not being afraid to make mistakes and mess up a little bit is probably a really good attitude to get in. That I probably need to take that advice for sure.
yeah, same here. So thank you for writing in. Really appreciate that. I also had an interesting one from someone with the username White Policio. And they said, I generally play solo with one hand, but I've just started playing two-handed, and it's becoming their preferred way to play. So the
Okay.
card combos are just a lot more fun. It's interesting and fun to play different spirits, and playing two lets you combo them, and yeah, it's just more interesting in general. And they've gone like that for a bit, but I think the general the general response we got was that if we played the game more, we wouldn't have said that it was better pure solo. I think that's the general reaction we got. I was just wondering what you thought of that one as well, Scruffy.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean, we made it quite clear last episode, I think, that we need to try it out a bit more, and maybe it will come when we've played a few more times and are a bit more familiar with it. But I mean, I personally, I'm having an absolute blast playing solo handed, or at least I was for the playthroughs. So the thing, I haven't actually played it since we recorded, and I'm excited to try doing it more for now. I'd be interested to know how many times it took to get comfortable moving into multi-handed, and whether playing with the more high intensity spirits makes it more difficult. But yeah, I can totally see that if I sort of go into it with a different attitude and stop trying to plan every little minor detail and just play the first best thing I can see in the flash moment, then maybe I'll have a better time with it. But for now, I'm sticking with single handed. I think it's a really valid way to play, and I don't often see people saying that, and I think it's a shame, because for me it's been the most fun I've had with the game.
Yeah, I would certainly recommend if you're learning the game, don't be afraid to ignore the popular opinion that it's best multi-handed. It seems that it's been more fun for me, so pure solo as well, and I think that has a lot to do with experience. So don't put too much pressure on yourself to play with two. The only thing you'll do, unless you're a genius, unlike us here, the only thing you'll do is you'll burn yourself out and you won't enjoy it as much. So that's my hot take on Spirit Island, I think. We had quite a lot of comments and people writing in on Reddit. I won't read them all out, but these next two are really nice. I just think you should hear them, Scruffy, because I do all the social media, so I think it's just nice for you to be able to hear them. So
Oh,
the first one, the one's from Lovelace and the other one's from Cooper. The first one's from Lovelace, who also follows us on Instagram. And they said, I was happy to find this podcast. I really like it. Has the potential to become one of my favorites. Isn't that awesome?
that's amazing. What a lovely comment. More of those, yeah, for sure.
Well, here's another one. If you want more of those. This one's from Cooper, who said, great podcast. Thanks. Always look forward to the newest episode.
Oh, thanks, guys. That's really nice.
Yeah, it's nice to know that we're doing well. So thank you very much for those comments. Thank you, everyone, for writing in. I think that kind of wraps up this episode.
Yeah, that was really fun. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll be back to normal next episode with a game for you. We are, as we kind of hinted at, looking at doing Ironsworn over next episode or soon. That's why we've done a less rules intensive episode for us this episode, because it's a lot to learn, a whole new system. So watch this space for potentially Ironsworn next episode, or who knows? We'll see what we end up.
Fingers crossed.
doing.
That's definitely what we're shooting for at the moment.
That's the plan. So if you've got any interest in RPs or solo RPs, I would definitely recommend checking out the next episode when we release that. Once again, want to say that the Discord is open and freely available now. Links to that are in the description. We can't wait to get a community buzz around this podcast and get to know you guys a bit better and just respond directly to your feedback,
Yeah, go join the Discord and go tell us your favorite solo games and your top fives. We want to just chat to you. That's been our objective from day one, is just to get people engaged with the podcast. So get on the Discord.
And once again, the question for this episode is, what is your top 5 solo games to play? Let's see those lists.
Thanks again for joining us, guys, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to support the show, don't forget to check out our Patreon page. The links to that are in the description. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Always Player One. Until then, reach out on Facebook, Instagram, or by email to keep the conversation going.